I'm excited to have you here today with me to be a part of my YouTube channel and also to introduce yourself to the Asheville Holistic Healthcare community at large and also to the clients you're going to be working with over the next several months. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Rebekah. I'm a nurse practitioner student at a school in Kentucky, Frontier Nursing University. I am slated to graduate in December or January of 2020, and I'm going to go on and get my doctorate, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited for you to join the practice, and so far it seems like it's going really well. I think you've been with me about a week now, and you've seen a few of the clients with me, and I've been impressed with your interaction with them. And one of the questions I have for you is the clients that you've seen thus far have been on medications, and I think that there is sometimes a misconception when people think of holistic healthcare from a psychiatric perspective or a health perspective that there's no meds or an opposition to medications. So were you surprised that I do prescribe medications in the practice?
I wasn't surprised, just because our role as psychiatric nurse practitioners, you're an herbalist, but we're not herbalists usually. I think one of our main roles is to prescribe medications. I just think that you have a nice balance of it where you see a place for them and a place where herbs and other holistic therapies can do the job. So I think that you pick and choose well when it will help and when it won't.
Thank you. And I just want to say to you and the camera that I'm herbalist trained, but I don't consider myself an herbalist. I think that to have that credential takes many years of working with herbs and botany, and I feel like I'm a newbie, even though I did, go through an herbalist training with the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine. Can you tell me about Frontier, because I know that you're impressed with Frontier University, the education you're getting, and I'm impressed from what you told me about it. So for the listeners and for me, the viewers, would love to hear about your school.
I think with any school, it is what you make it. Something that's really helped me in my education is my experience in psychiatric care, in psychiatric hospitals, working in psychiatry in the community. I think that kind of allowed me to build a foundation to have a good experience no matter where I went, and then I think Frontier has built upon that foundation. Grad school's a really different environment than undergrad was. I find my teachers are really supportive. My faculty really wants to help us and wants us to do well. I found my bachelor's in nursing program to be a little more punitive. But Frontier is really interesting. It was founded by a woman named Mary Breckenridge because there wasn't any medical care in Eastern Kentucky. She went there on a trip and found that just people's needs weren't being met. So she started a school where they were training nurses to basically be family nurse practitioners. Before that was a certification, and then it grew into a family nurse practitioner program, and then it's branched off into other specialties since then, like Psych NP, midwifery is kind of what they're really known for.
That's wonderful.
But so it's a really rural school that's focused on community-based health, and that's pretty focused on holistic health too, because that's what they provided to the Eastern Kentucky community historically. And it's an interesting fact about Frontier. So the roads are really bad in Eastern Kentucky. It's really steep. It rains a lot there. And so the nurses provided all of their care by horseback.
Wow.
So it's kind of something that was kind of interesting and attractive to me.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's how nurse practitioners began, as prescribers, going out to remote areas where physicians couldn't get to easily. Is that your understanding?
Well, they were meeting the need of of their region, and if they were not advanced practice nurses, is kind of how they were referred to at the time, instead of nurse practitioners, people would have suffered in the community more than they already were because of poverty and generations of coal mining and things like that.
Lack of access to care, to quality care. In some ways, this kind of segues into it. I was looking at your resume, and you've done some volunteer work. Do you think that that's an important facet of being a nurse and doing some giving back to the community?
I think so. I'd like to have time to do more of that sort of thing. I have a lot of friends that are like very, very involved in the community and with work and school and parenting. At the moment, I don't have a lot of time for it, but I liked when I did have more time. I think when I retire, I'll be a full-time volunteer woman. I especially like working with adolescents. I don't know, it just makes me feel like I'm helping.
Yeah. Some of the clients that you've seen thus far have been younger adults. Do you think that being relatable is helpful as a practitioner or as a nurse for clients to feel a comfort level and a relatability to you? And how do you make people feel at ease when you're working with them?
I think so. I feel like it's really important to normalize psychiatric issues and mental illness or personal struggles in a world where mental illness largely was taboo for a long time. I think as much as it is really normal, so the more that we can normalize it, I think that helps people succeed over time more than differentiating ourselves from our patients. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that mental health has become less stigmatized, and I can almost remember, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when, actually it's been even more, it's been close to 30 years, when there was just like a paradigm shift, and I think where there became a consciousness around mental health being similar to physical health, that there could be imbalances within the body, within the brain, and now we realize some imbalances within the gut can contribute to feeling off from a mental health perspective. And I think too, just a little aside here, that SSRI medications, when they came out, they had less side effects versus some of the other medications, and the atypical antipsychotics versus the antipsychotic medications. So the side effects helped, I think, destigmatize the field in some ways, in some kind of interesting ways. Are you interested in, it sounds like your school's very much around, holistic health. What personally do you feel like holistic health, looking at things from kind of a aerial perspective, is important?
It's sort of what I wrote my essay about when I was trying to get into this program. I was raised in a farming community. It was kind of like a hippie farming community, about 15 minutes from here in South Asheville, where people used a lot of herbs and a lot of alternative medicine, and we mostly grew all of our own food and raised our own livestock if we ate meat. And so I was sort of raised that way. So helping communities is something that I've always been interested in, and I think that it's been lost quite a bit in modern society. I feel like people are very nuclear, so that aspect of it, and then just, I think I'm interested in nutrition, I'm interested in herbal medicine and alternative remedies, because I don't think medication is always the answer, but I also feel like people can improve their quality of life with more holistic approaches. I feel like a lot of psychiatrists that I've met, a lot of them are great, and then some people are really med heavy because that's all they know. So the more that we can expand what we know, the more that we'll be able to provide to our patients.
What's the best way, do you think, to get the word out there? I mean, I'm hoping to be able to do this in some ways with the channel and newsletters and things like that, not only touching my clients but also the community at large, to do some some psycho-ed or education. How else do you think that we can do that as nurses?
I think that we can tell people that we know. I mean, that's one of the ways that we can destigmatize mental health is by talking about it. You know, we've all had issues, and then like getting the word out about holistic health. I mean, yesterday I told my supervising psychiatrist at an alternate clinical site location about NLIGHT. So NLIGHT is a methylated folate.
It has methylfolate in it, yeah.
And, you know, we were looking for sort of something like that for a patient, and I mentioned it. So the more that we can mention holistic treatment and alternative remedies to people that maybe aren't in that world, they're interested, they'll listen, they just need to be exposed to it.
I think it can be scary when you segue away from what you're used to, you know, what you're familiar with, and it takes just kind of hearing things sometimes over and over again from different sources, and we live in such an evidence-based practice world, which is a good thing, but sometimes it can be an impediment to. What do you think about, like, do you think that given the funding isn't as robust maybe for non-allopathic care, you know, non-allopathic remedies and herbals and things like that, the funding to support those kind of studies isn't as robust? Do you think it impedes people's ability to?
I think that's a major problem with why more people don't use alternative remedies, and why traditional psychiatrists don't utilize them in their practices, is because people are always thinking about how much is this going to cost. And with people with serious mental illness, a lot of times poverty goes hand in hand with that, and that's something that I've seen working within the community. And so sometimes that's something, like in different settings, that I really do have to think about for my patients, is like, how are they going to pay for this? How can I help them pay for this?
Right.
But I think the more that people that do have the resources use these alternative therapies, the more funding there will be for it. I think the more that we get the word out. I mean, even with what's happening with CBD, I mean, there's going to be insurance funding for that eventually, and it's because people have spoken up about it, and families have spoken up about how much it's helped their children, and so I think we're seeing things changing, but I don't think things are really changing. I think that they're just kind of going back to where they were like hundreds of years ago. What did we use for medicine? I think that with the rise of pharmaceuticals, that sort of got lost. And now we're just circling back to where we came from, because psychiatry is really only like 50, 60 years old, like modern psychiatry. And I think that, you know, it's like when something's popular and new, that's all people want to learn about. But now that modern psychiatry isn't as new, people are circling back to where we came from.
Right. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Or we can keep them both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you bring up a good point. Not only as practitioners do we want to see the evidence behind certain types of interventions, we also have to look at cost and reimbursement, and that's a good point, that is a huge issue. Do you think you'll do your own private practice, or do you think that you're going to be working in a community-based setting? What do you foresee between your master's and your doctorate?
I don't really know. I really knew what I wanted to do in nursing school. I knew I wanted to do psychiatry. But people ask me that all the time, and I'm like, well, that's why I'm excited about my clinical rotations, because I'm still unsure about where I'm going to go. The one thing that's super important to me is supervision. I'm not someone that likes to be pushed into situations or making decisions that I'm not comfortable with, because I'm very, very cautious, especially with patients and their conditions and medications and things like that. So wherever I end up, I want to have really good supervision, especially for the first 5 years or so. I'm looking at residency programs, because I feel like it'd be a really good opportunity for me to continue my learning so that I could do a better job for people.
That's great.
So maybe I'll do something in private practice when I have more experience under my belt.
Yeah, what are you going to do with your doctorate?
I think I'd like to teach some. I don't know.
Teaching.
Or teach when I get older. You know, I think it's, again, something to keep in my back pocket. I really like working with students, so I appreciate people that want to work with me. But I definitely, teaching has always been appealing to me.
That's great.
I like working, even as a nurse, when we have students on our floor, I really like working with students.
Yeah.
Because I like to learn, so.
Do you know what you're going to do your dissertation on?
I don't know. I was talking to some faculty before I came here about what his dissertation's on, and he said falls on inpatient psych units,
Yeah.
like fall prevention.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that was wise of him to choose because it's like simple, it's very concrete, but it's very needed. And so that's kind of what I'm going for, is simple, concrete, and needed.
That's great.
And then wherever I'm working, it's really about what they need. Like, what do they want to allow me the time to work on? It's going to be something that they need as a facility.
That's wonderful. You work currently as a nurse in various settings. Do you think that's important that NPs or advanced practice nurses, when they get out of school, have experience, inpatient and outpatient experience, and how has that helped you with your clinicals?
I personally think it's pretty important. I think it really depends on the person. I think people could have no psych experience and go through a psych NP school and be fine. It could also be a real shock if people don't have the right composition for it. I know that personally it's helped me, but I can't speak for everyone. It's just helped me so much. I've learned so much about meds. I'm a very curious nurse, and so I've always kind of probably badgered psychiatrists I work with and psych NPs I work with questions. So it's just, I think it's made the program a lot easier for me, honestly, because I came in with some knowledge. I have a general idea of what medication to prescribe for different things, and then I just had to narrow it down.
That's great.
But I'm glad I had experience. But I was 23 when I became a nurse, so I think that experience and maturity is something that's important, and I think that my time working as a nurse allowed me to mature as a person too, and I think that maybe that's more important than experience.
It's just time.
It's time and maturity.
Maturity.
Yeah.
What types of clients are you most comfortable working with in terms of demographics and issues?
On inpatient units, I really like working with, it's kind of a blend. So I like working with elderly people, and I like working with women. And then I don't know if I necessarily like working with really combative, angry patients, but or de-escalating people, but I found that I'm good at it. I don't know if anybody wants to work with somebody who's on an inpatient unit, really agitated, but I seem to be good at it. So and that makes me feel like I was able to help somebody when someone's really worked up, or they feel like we're not listening to them and they're just trying to make a point, or they're, confused about something, and we're able to calm them down and allow them to have a more comfortable experience. So like schizophrenic patients, I find that I've always been sort of good at maybe relating to them or making them feel comfortable, or
That's great.
maybe, I don't know if it's my body language or,
Did you do some work with ACT?
I did,
Okay.
and I really love that kind of work too. I found it to be like a challenge. It took a lot of critical thinking, a lot of problem solving. It was also like kind of exciting, but like very touching. It was hard. I had never seen the kind of poverty that I saw working ACT. I'd go into people's homes and they didn't have any electricity or running water or enough food in Western North Carolina. So I think one of the things about ACT that's hard is that you can get someone on the right medicine, but you can't necessarily resolve all their economic issues.
Yeah.
So it definitely takes the right type of person.
So much of nursing is around looking at what the problems are and addressing them, not from just a specific medication perspective, but also from a holistic perspective of, what kind of resources are needed to pull in. Maybe just quickly tell the viewers what ACT is, because some people watching this might not be familiar with ACT or the ACT.
So ACT is assertive community treatment, and you have an assertive community treatment team, which is a team of 6 to 8 people. And there are like social workers, there's a team lead, there's a nurse, there's a psychiatrist or a psych NP. And then like a peer support person, which is like usually a person that has a mental illness that's in remission, or maybe they're in recovery from addiction. And this team works with people that usually it's people that just end up in the hospital over and over because their needs aren't being properly met. And so that person is assigned an ACT team, and on an ACT team there's someone that they can always call 24 hours a day. And for a lot of people who ACT teams are helpful for are people that are pretty isolated or pretty seriously mentally ill, and don't have a lot of people in their lives that they can rely on or they can talk to when they're upset. And I think that that's what the most helpful part of it for a lot of my clients were, is just somebody to talk to. They could call me. They didn't want to go to the hospital anymore. A lot of the reasons for ending up in the hospital, sometimes every day or every week or every month, was because they were lonely.
It's wonderful that you did that work, and I just wanted to say it's kind of funny that you say you work well with women, because the clients that you've seen so far in my practice have been males, and it seems like you've been wonderful with them. So it sounds like you're really good with many different types of clients with many different types of challenges. How do you practice self-care? What are your things that you do to really help you stay fresh?
Exercise is really important for me. So I exercise probably almost every day. I do strength training, or I run, or I go to like group exercise classes. And then I spend a lot of time with my family and my parents and my boyfriend and my son. And then I think just spending time with my son doing things he likes, I find that to be really rejuvenating for me. Like taking him to a park and leaving my phone in the car, or getting off my phone, I think is important for me. Working in the garden, things like that. I like to cook.
That's great. So kind of earthy means of kind of connecting with family.
I'm pretty introverted. I seem extroverted, but I love to spend time at home, just with a small circle of people. I get exhausted, I think, if I'm too busy or going to too many big, busy social functions.
So you think it's pretty important to keep yourself fresh, and by just kind of recharging your battery.
Yeah, and I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night.
It's great.
So that's super important too.
Sleep is so important. What do you think, how would you like to see the nursing profession evolve? What kind of things do you see down the pipeline for nursing, and how could you be instrumental in kind of shaping the profession?
It's an interesting question. So nursing's so varied, and that's one of the reasons that I went into it, is because I knew that I would never get stuck if I was unhappy in one area. I think the rise of nurse practitioners has been really beneficial to nurses and the whole community and physicians. I think one of the things that's important to me is being involved with the North Carolina Nurses Association. They're people that are always, advocating for us and making sure that we are able to practice at our full potential. But I think you can take nursing anywhere you want. I think it's very individual on what you do with it.
Some states, I don't know if the viewers know this, but some states you don't need to have a supervising psychiatrist. Do you foresee in North Carolina that we'll go to more of an autonomous role, and do you think that that would be positive?
I think we will. I think in the next 5 years we'll be an independent practice state. You know, I think it's a good thing for people to be able to do that, but I don't know. I think the role of supervision is really important. I don't think we need supervision necessarily, but I worry that people might forget how important it is. I've read a lot of evidence about supervision. I did a project on it in school, and how like rates of burnout are higher when people don't have proper supervision, anybody, and how patients report that their care, suffers because what supervision is about is like decompressing and debriefing. So, if I used to work in children's psychiatry, and emotionally that was challenging. Sometimes we'd see things that were heartbreaking, and so having supervision, having someone you can go and talk to about your feelings as a provider, I think that's super important to keep us refreshed and keep us, so trauma that we receive from patients, that because patients have experienced trauma, like we receive secondary trauma from that.
Compassion fatigue.
It's like compassion fatigue, and it has to go somewhere. And it can either go somewhere positive or it can go somewhere negative. And I think the role of supervision allows it to go somewhere positive. That makes us better instead of like developing compassion fatigue.
Yeah. Do you think that as we move to being more autonomous and independent, that we could provide that with amongst ourselves?
Yes. I definitely don't think that we need. I don't think we need physicians in like a maternalistic or paternalistic role over us because we can't be independent. I don't know if that's the role of supervision.
Yeah. I'm fortunate to have a supervising psychiatrist who is a friend, and she's uniquely integrative in her approach from like a mind-body perspective. So it's nice to have her, but I can also say that I have nursing friends and a lot of therapist friends, especially therapist friends, who provide that support for me, where I can kind of not necessarily process individual patients, but just be there for me for understanding the depth and the scope of working in the mental health realm, and to provide support. So, anything you want to add, or any questions you have before?
I just really appreciate everybody that lets me sit in on your appointments, and confidentiality is super important to me.
Wonderful.
So I want everybody to feel comfortable, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I don't have the opportunity to learn some of the things that you do in your practice anywhere else. So
you're part of the practice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me today.